members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm your host and relationship coach, Fahima Mohammed. I want to extend a really warm welcome from myself and everybody here on British Muslim TV, and excited for tonight's show. And wherever you are watching, whether it's on Sky Channel 752, on Facebook, on Twitter, it's amazing to have you on the show, sponsoring us with your time as well as your support, and also tuning in to give us your comments and queries. You can actually call us directly at the studio and ask any question to myself or the guest, and that would be amazing to hear some of you speak. And the number that you need to dial for that is 01924231083. Standard network rates do apply, so do ensure that you ask the bill payer's permission before calling in, and that number will remain throughout the show. So please take your time and get those questions ready and do call us. You have an alternative way of getting in touch as well. If you wanted to anonymously message us with any queries or comments as well, and that is done through the free WhatsApp service, and that number is 07585835150. I am really excited for my guest tonight to introduce you, who is all the way from across the globe. And without further delay, I'd like to welcome Sameera Qureshi. Assalamu alaikum, Sameera.
Walaikum salam, Fahima, and everyone joining in. How are you?
I am really excited. I'm so well, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. So tell me firstly, whereabouts are you streaming from today?
So I'm really excited. I'm streaming from Calgary, Canada, which is in the western part of the country. It's where my family is, where this work started. But I typically live in the Washington, D.C. area. So I'm quite far from the UK right now.
That is amazing to have you tonight. I know how busy you are, and I know I've been planning this for such a long time, and I really appreciate your time. I'm so looking forward to the topic today. It's a really, really intense one. It's not an easy topic to cover, but it's so vital. And I am so honored to have your expertise on the show tonight. And today we are going to be discussing the sexual health issues within Muslim marriages, relationships, and it is something that we do try and shy away from, or we feel that we shouldn't really talk about. So before we actually go into this question, tell me a little bit about yourself and the work that you do, Sameera.
Absolutely. So I've been in this field of sexual health education for around 12 years. Starting here in Canada, I'm an occupational therapist by training, and very early in my career had the opportunity to work within Islamic schools addressing mental and sexual health education, mental health being another taboo topic, Muslims struggling with understanding Islamic perspectives. So as I dove into the research around sexual health education, Islamic scholarship, I developed curriculum and started teaching children in elementary school, and then expanded that all the way up to young Muslims, single, and then the married and parent age group. And moving to the United States about 5 years ago, I worked in the NGO or nonprofit space, focused on sexual abuse prevention. And I really dove into Islamic spirituality about 2 years ago and realized that we need to start from within our tradition if we're going to talk about sexual health. We can't just talk about the body and mind, we also have a soul. And as Muslims, that conversation is missing. So a year ago, I founded my own business, Sexual Health for Muslims. It's a completely online platform, social media, and other opportunities to learn. And it brings sexual health education to the comfort of your homes, which is what you and I, or Fahima, are doing this evening. So I'm blessed that I'm able to create work that feels authentic to my spiritual path and also Islam. And I'm excited to be connecting with you and others tonight to talk about this topic.
Fantastic work. I love everything that you've just shared, and it's really valuable and insightful so far, and we've just got into it. But the thing is, I want to go straight into the question of sexual issues as well as Islam. That sentence, having those two things in one, usually does make people very, very uncomfortable. And they don't usually feel that this is something that we need to speak, especially on a platform, whether it's Muslim women speaking, whether it's an open platform where everybody can hear this kind of information. What is your response to this, Sameera?
We need to start at the beginning to understand this really important question. When we talk about being Muslim and how Allah created us, we have to understand that all parts of us are sacred and have been designed for specific reasons and for spiritual reasons. So just as we have a physical body, we have a brain, and we have mental and physical health, we cannot deny that Allah created us with sexual health. Now, when I say the word sexual health, most Muslims only hear the first three words and they think, oh, this must mean sex. And this is one of the biggest misunderstandings when we talk about sexual issues, as you mentioned, Fahima. So when we think about ourselves as Muslims and Allah created us with certain body parts, with certain functions, with the ability to reproduce if that's in our destiny, to marry, to share in sexual intimacy, and to heal from trauma, we have to think that Allah created us with sexual health. That doesn't mean that we're sexually active from birth to death. We're only sexual active for a specific part of our life within Islamic guidance and guidelines, but we do have sexual health our whole lives, and our sexual health, our body parts grow and develop with us alongside our mental and spiritual health. So my understanding, and I hope folks can also understand, is we need a holistic definition of sexual health. It's not something that is turned off until marriage, which interestingly creates a lot of the sexual issues we'll probably chat about tonight. So for everyone listening, I really encourage people to reflect on Allah's divine and sacred way of creating us as Muslims, our soul and our sexual health, and that we grow and develop with our soul and sexual health, just as we do with other parts of our life.
I love that. It's so amazing the way you put it and brought it together. And it's really important that we do raise this issue, especially, in a platform like this, that people do have that kind of insight, because we do have the shyness of not actually wanting to bring it up. Even if it was to talk personally to our private GP, we really don't want to speak about things like this. And I'm not saying that we should be open about it in a sense that it shouldn't be where there are guidelines, but it is something that it is definitely an issue around this, especially within our Muslim community. Now, coming on to Muslim community, when you say, sexual health issues within the Muslim community, I mean, we've all got the same body cells, biology, science. So what is the difference when it comes to Muslims and sexual issues or sexual health issues? Is there a difference because of the community, or is it just something that you just want to focus on in your line of business when it comes to Muslims and helping them? Do they need it more or less? What is that, sort of for you?
That's a really common question, and I want to reassure Muslims listening that the sexual health issues that we face are no different than any other religious or non-religious community. The fact that though we are Muslim, we have an Islamic tradition, that there is a diversity of Muslim cultures and beliefs and ranges of practices means that the sexual health issues manifest in different ways. So the reason that I focused on this specific topic was I saw gaps that weren't being filled. So the Islamic schools that I worked at were being encouraged to teach about sexual health education in an age-appropriate way, and they were hesitant. They were telling me things like, how do we reconcile sexual health education with being Muslim, and how can we do it with an Islamic framework? And so my goal to focus on this topic was to fill a gap. And I also want to say that there are many people who've done this work for decades across the world, that their work is just not known because it's often done in smaller communities. It's not on social media like it is now. So I want to give credit to individuals who have worked within their own spaces across the world trying to educate Muslims. But now with social media, there's a broader platform, as you said, and it's becoming more available and accessible to Muslims.
That's amazing. That's great. The other thing that you mentioned earlier was that sexual health does not solely mean sex and intimacy. Could you explain that a little bit more for us?
Yes. If we think about our lifespan as a human being, around the age of 2 or 3, if you think about little kids, they start to gain awareness about their body. We're teaching them toilet training, how to use pull-up nappies, as you call it, or diapers, and we're teaching them how to dress and how to wash themselves. That is sexual health for a child. It is taking care of their reproductive parts. It's making them be independent. As Muslims, we teach them about hygiene being an Islamic value, that you don't have to hug an elder if you're not comfortable, that it's all right. You can just say assalamu alaikum. That's the sunnah. The sunnah is not to give touch when we're uncomfortable to people we don't know. That is sexual health as a young child and as an example. Then we think about children who grow up and go to school, and then they learn about friendships. They learn about their bodies. They learn about being online, which is such a huge problem with young children and onwards, with exposure to pornography, for example. And then we know that, development is puberty. All of those new emotions, those new feelings, our spiritual accountability to Allah kicks in during puberty. And then, as you mentioned, Fahima, when we grow and we become younger adults, when we are seeking a life partner, when we're navigating difficult relationships, when we're married, having children, intimate, when we age and we go through menopause, hormonal changes, everything I just mentioned, and I think I missed a lot in there because I'm not as comprehensive in describing it, that is all sexual health. And so we have to understand that our sexual health is part and parcel of our development, just as we develop spiritually as Muslims as well.
I actually don't agree with the fact that you said that you didn't describe it well, because I thought you described it absolutely amazing. And the fact that you've just, sort of said that in a way that sexual health, with all the things that you've actually addressed when it comes to even children from a young age being touched and by certain people and not being allowing themselves to be putting themselves in a vulnerable situation. I think this is so important and vital right now, especially in this day and age and with everything that's happening. So I loved exactly how you described that. And I think it's absolutely important the way, your work is supported and continues, inshallah. I have so much more questions for you, and we do have a few messages as well coming through, but we are coming to a short break. However, before we go to that, I just want to remind the viewers that I know this is not an easy topic to address, and I completely understand that this is something that, may take you some time, but we do have a free WhatsApp anonymous message that you can contact us and ask. So we are here to take your calls and messages, and I would love to hear from you. And we will continue with more questioning for our guests tonight. But until then, we will see you after a very, very short break. Please do stay tuned. Take care. See you soon.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live. With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. And we are having a really interesting conversation here tonight with Sameera Qureshi, all the way from Canada. She is really gracing herself with regards to her knowledge, her insights, and all her education, all things around sexual health, especially within the Muslim community. And in our relationships, it's such an important factor. Sameera, when it comes to the issues that Muslims do face today, what would you say are some of the struggles that are being faced? I know there's a list, but we're going to go through it, and you can give us some of the main reasons why Muslims are struggling, and what are those reasons that are being put out there all the time, and what is the top ones that keep coming up all the time that you feel that you can actually talk about tonight?
Absolutely. So I want to say there's a diversity of reasons why we're facing issues, and I can definitely touch on the most common ones. The first, I would say, is lack of comprehensive sexual health education with accurate Islamic perspectives. So oftentimes as Muslims, we gain very limited Islamic understanding that is relegated to halal and haram. And I've kind of coined this the haram box. So we often are taught, for example, that sex before marriage is religiously impermissible. And a lot of parents, they're doing their best. There's a lot of fear around children losing their faith tradition. So they often give very shame and fear-based messages. If you have sex before marriage, you will be punished, you'll be sent to hellfire, your family's reputation will be impacted. So what happens is we are disconnected from our God-given sexual health. So we shut everything off, we don't feel safe to ask questions, and we develop a very fear and shame-based relationship with sexual health, which what I'm seeing when consulting with Muslim couples, for example, is it manifests within marriage. Remember, sexual intimacy in marriage is not a light switch. We have to unlearn and then relearn everything that we've been exposed to if we want to deal with sexual issues. So the lack of education overall, and then very limited Islamic perspectives, which is even inaccurate Islamically, because a lot of Muslims see Islam as a bunch of checklists, that if we do X, Y, and Z, we're going to make our way to Jannah. So I need to stay in this box and be comfortable. Whereas we don't have the skills and tools to navigate sexual health as Muslims in the 21st century, which means that we are left to our own devices. So that's a long way to explain with a bit more detail that lack of education and then narrow and limited Islamic perspectives are creating a box within which Muslims are understanding sexual health, and that leads to a lot of issues that come up.
Do you feel that's the mainly the problem of maybe the parents, or do you think it's the Muslim community leaders? Where would you like to see some change that this can actually be addressed in the correct form and manner? Where do you stand on that?
If I reflect on my work in Muslim spaces, especially in North America, the answer is multifaceted. I believe, for example, that parents do the best they can with what they know. And without information from educators, from religious leaders, from other folks, they're doing the best they can, just as we are navigating sexual health. So I actually believe that Islam as a whole needs to be uncolonized. We have to go back to our 1500-year tradition. We have to get away from this puritanical understanding. We have to look at scholars such as Al-Ghazali, such as modern day scholars who are talking about the role of the soul in understanding sexual health and understanding how we can journey with our soul. So I believe it starts with a complete decolonization of Islam, which means that we have to bring back scholarship from the past. We have to empower more Muslims to become educators in the field, to become therapists, to be helping parents who I believe are primary sexual health educators, and they need support. So, and we also need to empower professionals, the doctors, the OB-GYNs, the sex therapists who are not Muslim working with Muslims. So in my opinion, it's a broad global approach that's needed so that we're not placing the pressure and onus on anyone. We're normalizing the conversation of sexual health rooted within a traditional Islamic perspective, so everybody feels like they're empowered and they can normalize this conversation within their own life.
That is very, very insightful, actually. And I love how you address that, because I guess in every area, we all have a responsibility, whether it comes from the professionals, whether it comes from the Muslim leaders, or in your home. So yeah, absolutely. I think that we should not just put it into one area. It's everything that's required. You did also mention earlier that Muslims do struggle with their sexual health across their lifespan. Could you maybe expand on that as well, as to what does that mean with regards to all the different stages that we go through, and what are these stages with regards to the struggles that may differ accordingly?
Absolutely. So if we think about direct struggles, for example, child sexual abuse is a reality within Muslim spaces that we do not speak enough about. And so I think that causes obviously trauma, physical, spiritual, emotional, mental trauma. And that is one example where there is direct harm and abuse being done to Muslim children. Oftentimes the age range of 3 to 6 years old is most and first at risk, because they're entering preschool, they're entering primary school, as you would say in the UK. So they're at risk. There's also indirect harm that happens with children, because children's brains are sponges. They observe everything around them, whether it's from their iPad, their parents, how their mom looks at themselves in the mirror, and talks about her body, children see that. So children are receiving a lot of indirect messages from their parents, from their communities about sexual health. And they're obviously being exposed to pornography around, average research shows, age 8, accidental pornography exposure, because parents are giving children technology without teaching them that they're tools, not toys, and there's rarely any guidelines. So just to brush upon the first 10 years of life, there are factors that are impacting children. And that continues as we develop. As different hormones and emotions kick in, we tend to struggle more in adolescence. We want to fit in. We might want to take risks, and those risks seem easier when they're online, right? Or when a friend shares an explicit image or video. And those struggles continue with us. When we try and seek a spouse, many of us don't know how to navigate that world. Many of us don't know what we're looking for. We also don't know how to articulate our sexual values. For example, telling a prospective spouse, I don't want to engage in sexual intimacy until I'm married. These are my values, and I would like my physical boundaries to be respected. We also don't know that many Muslims are engaging in premarital sexual intimacy because, again, I believe they're not being told how to manage that. They're often taught to suppress it. So again, as we've just gone through the lifespan up until age 25, you can imagine when we're married, the stresses of a new marriage, of dealing with in-laws, extended family, trying to get pregnant, having pain when having sexual intimacy, sexual desire changes postpartum, hormonal changes. I mean, there's so much that is physical, emotional, and spiritual that impacts us, that until we have an understanding of baseline sexual health as Muslims, we may not know what's an issue, we may not have language to talk about it, and we may not know where to go. So a lot of Muslims reach for help when they're absolutely at their last point, or when they come across someone that they feel comfortable speaking with.
That is so true. We do need to make sure that we do have this kind of support. And here on British Muslim TV, I know that some of you watching and listening right now may be having an impact which is negative, and we do have a support system here. So if you do want to reach out while listening, please do so, and contact BritishMuslim.tv/support for any of your concerns while listening tonight. I also want to add that we do actually love to hear some of your voices. So if you do feel the urge to call in, we would like to hear your sort of messages and questions. We can keep you anonymous if you do wish to do so. When it comes to the common issues before marriage, I think it does differ, obviously. So tell me a little bit about that when it comes to the sexual issues and concerns that an individual may have before entering a relationship. How is that on your end when you have come across clients and people that have come to you with these kinds of sort of problems and wanting your advice? What is the main thing that keeps rising again and again?
Absolutely. So some of it, I will say, is related to having experienced trauma, whether that's sexual or emotional trauma, directly or indirectly, and Muslims being impacted by that. And it's showing up when they are thinking about their future. So for a specific example is, I have a lot of young women and men reaching out who have been miseducated about sex, and they're worried about intimacy during marriage. So for example, a lot of young women who've been traumatized with how sex on the wedding night, quote, has been described, how there's unfortunately an overemphasis on Islamic rights, in quotes, of husbands with regards to sex, and women being really worried about, well, how do I navigate that? Do I have a voice in marriage? What does consent in Muslim marriages look like? So there's a lot of fear among single Muslims because of the messages they've received indirectly and indirectly, and layer on trauma on addition to that. And we're dealing with a lot of Muslims who are feeling worried, nervous, scared about entering into marriages and seeking a spouse. So that's one main issue that I'm seeing. A second issue I'll say, which I briefly mentioned, is this concept of sexual shame, which is when we feel inherently unworthy or disconnected from our God-given sexuality and sexual health. So when we receive messages that are haram box based, very limited, when they are coupled with fear of Allah, punishment of Allah, sin, we often associate all of sexual health and who we are as a person with those messages. And we carry that with us. And research has shown that the way that shame manifests is it's within our bodies. So it's not only within our thoughts, within our soul, it's within our bodies physically. So we may have muscle tension that arises. It may lead to certain pelvic floor conditions, such as pain with sexual intimacy or intercourse. It may also deal with not having or feeling sexual pleasure within marriage. Like what is that meant to be like? I don't even understand myself as a sexual being. How can I be intimate now in marriage? So I'll say that shame is one large subtopic that we see. And the second one is being traumatized indirectly or directly with regards to inaccurate messaging about sexual health.
That is really, really useful that you've shared that with us. And I really do appreciate that, because I know that a lot of us right now are actually, trying to navigate with this. But we will be back after a short break and continue in this conversation. Please do stay tuned and we will catch you at the other end of the show. Make sure that you have yourself comfortable. And inshallah, we'll be having more questions for Sameera after the short break.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live. With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. And we're having a wonderful conversation with my guest tonight, Sameera, such a gem, throwing so many insights and sharing so much with us. And I really appreciate it. We were talking before the break with regards to the concerns that people have before marriage. Now, when it comes to during marriage, we hear that a lot here on the platform as well, especially after years. You would think that, you are close to that partner, you've had many years of experience, and that will not allude to any sort of issues. How wrong are we? What are the issues that come constantly in your experience, in your business, with regards to people coming up with, issues after being married for many years? And what are the reasons for it, Sameera?
Absolutely. So I'll present this in a trajectory in terms of a typical, let's say, marriage. Early on, let's say after the nikah and some time has been spent, there's two common issues that come up. One is I'm struggling with having sexual intercourse or pleasurable sexual intimacy. We've tried, I'm not feeling any pleasure and I don't know what's wrong. And the second being, there was a spark there at the beginning for a few months after our wedding. Everything was great. We wanted to be intimate quite often. And now it feels like that has kind of dissipated. So those are two kind of opposing but related sides in terms of how easily actually sexual desire and pleasure can be impacted depending on the presence of pelvic pain. So vaginismus is unfortunately a common condition that many Muslim women may face when they have pain with sexual intercourse, either attempted or with actual intercourse happening. And then as the marriage progresses, we know that stressors kick in. There's a period of time where we're trying to become attuned to our spouse. So oftentimes spouses will say to me, I think something's wrong with my spouse's desire. They don't want to engage in intimacy, whereas I want it. So what do I do? Am I allowed to demand sex from them? The answer is no. We can go there and talk about why. There's no forced sex allowed within Muslim marriages. But there's oftentimes a misunderstanding that actually men and women have very different sexual desires. And because we don't understand that, we think that something's wrong or broken as women if we're not desiring sex as much as our husbands. Or on the opposite side, I have women reaching out saying, my husband doesn't seem interested in sex. What's going on? And the reasons for that, which are common across all sexual health issues, could be physical or physiological. Our hormones play a large role in sexual desire. For example, the wanting of intimacy, right? Or what's called libido. We also know that our mental factors can impact our sexual intimacy in marriage. Are we stressed? We're still in a COVID pandemic. We're in lockdown. We may have children knocking on our door when we're trying to be intimate with our spouse. We may have in-laws who are needing our attention, and our jobs are stressful. So mental factors. And then spiritual as well. Are you connected to your spouse? Are you fostering spiritual spaces to share in one another? And as I actually posted on social media today, a really common issue, Fahima, across a marriage lifespan is this myth that sex in marriage needs to be spontaneous. I cannot tell you the number of times I'm in consultations with couples virtually, just as I'm chatting with you, and they're describing how they're trying to be intimate. And I tell them, have you ever thought about scheduling sexual intimacy with your spouse, like a date? And the number of times where there's like what? Like, we can do that? Like, we can schedule time? We can say, hey, on Friday evening, it's just going to be us. Like, there's this erroneous idea that the desire appears out of nowhere. And that's causing a lot of issues as well. And then, once especially women have children, you can imagine the postpartum phase. There's been giant changes that happen. Oftentimes women don't really feel like they're in their body anymore because it belongs to their child now. So now they're expected to still be sexually intimate with their spouse, and they may not even have had time to take care of themselves, body, mind, and soul. And then as we age, hormones change around the time of menopause. And even in men, there's a decline in testosterone, and testosterone in men and women impacts desire. So there might be changes as we approach menopause or our 40s for men and 50s, where we're like, it doesn't quite feel the same. I need a little bit more to get my sexual engine going. I need a little bit more to accelerate it. So there are things that we can do to kind of help that process. But as I, spoke about just now, there's a lot of issues, and they do show up in different ways across the lifespan of a marriage. But oftentimes a very nuanced, holistic approach to assessing the problem is needed. There's no quick fix often.
I really love that you've highlighted what you have, because it just also makes me aware that it's so much knowledge that we need to still gain for ourselves as individuals, because even when we are getting older, we're not actually aware of our body and how it's actually affecting ourselves and our partner and our relationships. So by you actually stating what you have, people may not even know that they're actually going through these hormonal changes, and it's actually affecting their desire, their lust. And a lot of couples may come and say that, well, he doesn't, love me anymore, or there is no connection, when actually it's just a chemical reaction in your body that you need to maybe be aware of, take, seek some advice about that from, some medical experts. And, that can also be resolved, because I hear that a lot myself, and there is a disconnect. And the thing is, I'm wondering, when people are married for so long, obviously there has been a connection and desire, but all of a sudden we use terminologies that we're not loving each other anymore. There's no connection. And I'm sure that is in some cases, but a lot of the times it's just miscommunication and not having the knowledge. And it's so important that you've shared this tonight, because I think we do need to look deeper within ourselves and what we're going through, and understand the phases that we're going through, and also our partner. But even in saying that, with couples that have been married for so many years, you find that there's still a lack of communication with regards to their sexuality, and even sharing what they like, what they don't like, because even what was liked before years ago has changed. And how would you encourage couples to maybe have those conversations again? Because sometimes they have that shyness between them. And I know it's great to have that shyness. Sometimes it's nice, right? But at the same time, when you're not satisfied and when you're not feeling fulfilled in that relationship, whether it's emotional intimacy or physical intimacy, it starts both ways. Like, how would you advise, a couple to sit down and address this in the best manner, so that there is no one trying to put anyone down or even disregard that there is something there? How would you guide them through this, Sameera?
That's a great question. And as somebody who tries to get to the root of the problem, I think that's what we have to do. So in a lot of my work, I encourage a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness. So taking time to figure out, okay, where is this discomfort coming from? Is it difficulty with understanding my spiritual rights, for example, to sexual pleasure? And I love Angelica Lindsay Ali, the village auntie, who I'm sure many of us know. She speaks so much
Yes.
about, women, like, you have a God-given right to sexual pleasure and orgasm. And I encourage people, if they're looking for that spiritual kind of connection or that urge to figure out, this is what I need for myself, her content is incredible for that. And then I also think, adding on to the spiritual component, there's a cognitive component. Is it that you lack language to speak to your spouse, which happens so much? Is it that you are worried about their reaction? Is it that you aren't really sure about, like, even the words to use? Because what I see is that Muslims use words like it instead of words like vulva or sex or intimacy. Like, there's kind of a roundabout way. So unless we're specific about words, then it can be hard to describe what we want. A lot of times too, I'm finding spouses don't understand the difference between arousal, desire, and pleasure. So if we don't see things as being separate concepts that are related, everything kind of just feels like one thing. And it's hard to tease out, like, for example, saying the words, I'm not feeling any pleasure, is different than saying, I'm not feeling like having intimacy or being intimate with you. So the language component, the education, also how to communicate. I will say for myself, I thought that I was empathetic until I did premarital counseling. And then I realized, oh boy, I don't know how to communicate with a spouse. It's different than being a therapist. So we have to learn how to hold space with our spouse, how to set time aside. You don't want to be springing this conversation of sexual pleasure on at the breakfast table, for example, or after work. You want to say, hey, John, can we sit and talk about this, for example, later this week? So we give control to our spouse to say, I think I'm in a good headspace. Let's chat about this now. So I think self-assessment, self-awareness, grounding ourselves spiritually, figuring out what thoughts are getting in the way. And I always tell everybody who I work with, including parents, focus on your own knowledge and comfort with your body before you communicate and try to share your thoughts with somebody else. We're so quick to want to share sometimes that we don't take time to ground and really reflect. And I often practice this conversation with some people before they talk with their spouse. And I recommend people journal it out, look at other educators such as myself and others online. We often share language. You can use that. So I'm trying to throw in as many ideas as possible because we're all at different stages and communicate differently. And those are some of the tips that I'd really recommend.
I love those tips. Really, really useful, very valuable. And the other thing was, I loved how you mentioned about how we don't know how to communicate. But having said that, I think even as men and women, we can talk to our friends really openly. But when it comes to our actual spouse, who we should be really close to, sometimes it's the most difficult thing to say out loud to them. So yeah, setting time aside and knowing at the right moment to address this, so that we're not going to offend anyone and we're not putting anyone down. We're just addressing an issue. So using the right language is so important, but you have to have that knowledge and awareness yourself. So do seek that support. It is really important because this is something that we have here on British Muslim TV, that we want to have amazing relationships, especially in our community, with such a rise in divorce rates and people getting married a lot later in life as well. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing is another topic, but at the same time, there is a fear and there's also a misunderstanding of knowledge and education. And this is a big part. A lot of people do actually feel that when they are going into a relationship and into marriage, it's only because they want to be intimate with the other person as well, when it's so much more than that. And even if that's a big part, we do need to consider so much more around it. So I love everything that you've shared, and we are going to come back after the break in order to discuss much more, because my head is really like reading with so much more information right now and so much more questions for you, Sameera. You're absolutely brilliant tonight, and you really dropped so many jewels and so much information, and I hope that the viewers are enjoying it as much as I am, because this is so vital. And you do have an opportunity tonight to speak to our guest, who is here just for today today and is sharing her insights. And I would love for you to take the opportunity to speak to her directly. So if you want to, we will be back after the show. Please do stay tuned and we will see you shortly. Please make sure that you use the WhatsApp message if you do choose to call us anonymously as well.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live. With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. This is the final part of the show. I cannot believe how fast it has gone. And we do have a few messages that have come through on WhatsApp for Sameera, saying, firstly, it is absolutely amazing that Sameera is with us tonight, especially on the sexual health issues within Muslim marriages. Before marriage, there can be some worries about the bedroom. It's a good topic, Fahima, thank you. It's okay to be shy and have shyness, and British Muslim, has this platform for everybody to have their thoughts anonymously as well as call in. So thank you for the show. Thank you for that message, by the way. The other message we have is saying that they do agree that sex is sacred and sexual health of our human bodies is definitely something that needs to be taught more and learned more. The awareness and to learn and try, obviously, to make the effort in doing so, especially when it comes to children. This is a question for you, Sameera. It's more of a dating question. It was like last week, Thursday, I had my vaccine and I saw a hijabi Muslim waitress after leaving the hospital. And I was genuinely speechless by her beauty. Yeah, I'm in my 20s and genuinely okay to be this way. Do you think it was because of her beauty and her body? I'm a little shy and ashamed by this. And do you think it's fair to say it's a little crush? My question is that the best way to give her my social media details, for her to add me? Or was this just my reaction to because of my libido? So what is your sort of response to that, Sameera?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for sharing that question. And I want you to feel very normal about the reaction that you had. When we talk about sexual desire, it's something that Allah created us with. And a lot of Muslims may not realize that we're able to manage our sexual desire in a way that's not shameful. So I often joke with Muslims that if you're feeling sexual desire or attraction, alhamdulillah, because those processes are working in the way that they were created to work. And that for those who don't feel as much, that's also normal. Allah created us in very different ways, and we might need more to kind of get our desire going. So I would say acknowledge that you felt attraction. There's nothing to be ashamed about that. Feelings are not haram, right? We're not judged by our feelings. We are judged by our intentions and ultimately some actions. So then I would reflect on, well, you can feel initially attracted to somebody, and then what else in a more deeper spiritual, mental, emotional way would you be interested in getting to know someone, for example, for this path of marriage? So we know that the Hadith provides guidance around, for example, somebody's virtue, their character, their Islamic values. Those are really important. And that beauty is there. It's not number one on the list because that can change as of tomorrow. Our heart and our soul are ultimately what is journeying with us. So I love that you asked this question. I think don't feel ashamed. I think have some more reflection about what your goals are. What are you seeking in a life partner? What is your understanding of Islamic guidance around that? And think of how you'd like to reach out. A lot of folks are using social media to do that. Instead of giving their personal numbers, for example, it's a bit more distant in a way. So really reflect on the decision you make. Is there a sense of urgency, or are you making this decision fully informed and fully feeling like you are aware of yourself and what you're looking for? And it sounds like you're very discerning already, which is mashallah great. Keep that inner dialogue going, reach out for education as well. And just, I always say, pray and do the best you can and move forward, and inshallah, Allah will guide you.
That is true. Having that sort of, awareness of knowing how you feel is also, quite important, actually. So, yeah, thank you for those messages. I really do appreciate that. We have sexual shame, quite prevalent issue in our Muslim community, and many Muslims do struggle with that. Why do you think that is, Sameera?
So when I read about the research of sexual shame, it is something that is quite insidious and challenging to deal with, especially when it's linked with our values as Muslims. So, we as Muslims are trying to be on the straight path. We're trying to become closer to Allah. And then when it's kind of misused in a way that is making sexual health or sex unsacred or unworthy, then you can imagine that as a Muslim, how do you understand sexual health and sex in light of being Muslim? Like, how do you reconcile the shame that you have? And shame causes a lot of disconnect. It causes a lot of unworthiness. So it can be quite insidious in terms of it being in our soul, in our thoughts, in our actions. And ultimately, shame shuts down our sexual response. So it can impact our desire, for example, so that attraction or that wanting, libido. It can impact our sexual arousal in marriage. If we feel ashamed, we're not going to necessarily feel aroused when we're with our spouse, for example. It may impact sexual pleasure. If I'm ashamed of feeling sexual pleasure, for example, within marriage with my spouse, it's going to be really hard to feel sexual pleasure. It's going to shut it down. So when we look at the trajectory of shame, it is quite broad in terms of its impacts. And so when we're looking at undoing shame, we have to bring awareness to where it came from. What are the sources of my shame? How can I bring new understandings in terms of Islam and sexual health education? And then how can I spiritually ground myself and kind of undo the shame that lives within me and see sex and sexual health as something spiritual? And then being able to talk about things is ultimately what unravels sexual shame, because shame exists through silence. It exists through suppressing. It exists through hiding in corners. And to give shame a chance to undo itself, we have to give it words. We have to give it the light of day, and we have to give it time to process spiritually, emotionally, and physically as well.
That is lovely. Muslims can both prevent and intervene with sexual health issues in a number of ways. What are they, Sameera?
Yes. So I would say the number one way right now, every Muslim watching and everyone who will watch the recording afterward, reflect on your knowledge of sexual health. We have to start with what we know or think we know before we can unlearn and relearn. And this process of unlearning is quite important, because we have often gained inaccurate messages about sex and sexual health. So assess what you know, assess where it came from. Was it an accurate source? Was it comprehensive? Was it spiritually holistic? And then think about your life stage. So for example, for those who are perhaps adolescents, so older teenagers, do you understand your basic body processes? Do you understand your menstrual cycle? Do you understand the process of intimacy and spiritual understandings of that from Islamic perspectives? Do you understand what a healthy relationship is and how to navigate searching for a spouse? So if we think about our life stage, we can kind of take time to catch up, so to speak, with preventing issues by educating ourselves. Now, if you are facing issues, let's say they are physical or physiological in nature, I often help a lot of Muslims connect to GPs or family physicians, women's healthcare providers such as OB-GYNs. There's pelvic pain specialists, physiatrists, pelvic floor therapists, all the way to sex therapists and counselors. So, I mean, there's many professionals available for support, including educators such as myself and others. So it really depends on what you're looking for in terms of an issue. And a lot of times Muslims need kind of more awareness about what is the issue specifically? How can I describe it to a healthcare provider? Is my issue normal, or am I dealing with something that's completely not normal, which is rarely the case? We deal with a lot of the same issues as other folks who are not Muslim. So I would say that once you educate yourself, as you said, Fahima, Muslims can then reflect on, oh, I am struggling with this. I have struggled with this, and I've never had a chance to really explore this. So education is prevention, and it's also intervention. And I think it has to start there, both using our tradition Islamically and starting from there, and then infusing sexual health content within our Islamic framework.
Yeah, that is so true. And I'm glad you shared some of the resources and certain things that we need to obviously make ourselves aware of when we do have these issues. We are coming towards the end of the show, and I want to give you an opportunity to say some final words. If people are struggling with their sexual health issues, regardless of which stage and phase they're at, what would be your takeaway, and also sharing some of your personal details of how they can get in contact with you as well. So some final words before we end, plus your details to get in contact with Sameera.
Absolutely. So I'll say to those Muslims who feel like you're struggling, you're not alone, and there's different ways that you can seek support. If your issue is mostly physical in nature, such as pain or difficulty with intercourse, whether you're a male or female, your family physician, your GP may be the best person to reach out to. I'm often a middle point person where people reach out to me and say, hey, Sameera, I'm struggling with this. Like, what plan should I take? So I'm somebody who educates, and then I often will refer out and help them find professionals in the field and give them language to advocate for themselves. So I'm kind of, that broker. I go in between different people, as we say in the West. I guess a broker in the UK might mean something different. And in terms of how to reach out to me, my website is SingleMuslim.com. I have the same Instagram handle as well. I have just dipped my toe into TikTok, and as much as I don't like it, I'm going to try and stay on there. But Instagram is where I do most of my education, because the platform allows for a lot of detail, which, as you can tell, I really like. I offer online courses from the privacy of your home. I offer one-on-one consultations, and I've had quite a few people from the UK reach out, alhamdulillah, so it's been wonderful. And I also offer webinars, so I'll be doing more on-demand webinars for people who can join and learn. And inshallah, with professionals too. A lot of non-Muslim healthcare professionals misunderstand how to work with Muslims. And I think it's really important that we teach them how to work with Muslims across the lifespan.
Thank you so much. It's been so enlightening to have you today. It's a fantastic topic, and no one better that I could have chosen than yourself tonight. Thank you so much, Sameera. Really appreciate your time and everything that you have said. Please do reach out to Sameera. She is absolutely amazing, a really useful resource to go to. Thank you so much for everybody that has tuned in and watched across the globe, and wherever you're streaming from. We want to say really amazing good night from all of us here on the British Muslim team and myself. And if you have any questions and comments, please do still send them through, and we will inshallah see you on the next episode next week. Have a lovely evening. Assalamu alaikum.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.